I mean, he's one of the best in the industry. Over 2 million photographs. He actually sold his whole collection, like back in 2004, sold all of his photos to Getty Images.
The Rona Roundtable with Rick Ralph is back
on your home of the Winnipeg Jets.
TSN 1290. TSN1290.ca.
Game day here on the home of the Jets, TSN 1290. Jets and Wild tonight here on the radio station, TSN 1290. TSN 1290, by the way, this time of year, a number of books start to come out here, and we're always pleased to talk a little bit of, usually hockey. And this book that comes out is going to be a little bit different. Bruce Bennett is the author. Now, when I say the author, he is also the photographer, and that is his line of work. Hockey's Greatest Photos, the Bruce Bennett collection. And if you have seen a hockey photo, you have seen his work. And Bruce joins us now. Bruce, I understand 2 million photographs you had. You've got it down to 250. I mean, that deserves some sort of an award.
Yeah, it took a couple of hours to get through that. My eyes are bleeding, and it was basically a one-year project. I went through 600,000 approximately of the 2 million. Few strategic cuts there, going to a couple of 100,000, going to 8,000, going to 500, and a lot were left on the cutting room floor.
The book is called Hockey's Greatest Photos, the Bruce Bennett collection. I mean, we're talking about 4 decades of covering hockey, whether it be Stanley Cup, regular season, international hockey for you. You must have had an idea. You mentioned 600 photographs right there. You would have an idea that there would be some right away that you would want, just based on memory?
I guess through the years, I kept a file in analog form, meaning a slide or print. I kept a file and later on scanned them. So from computer to computer and onto hard drives and backup drives, I had a folder with about 75 to 100 images that I knew someday would end up in my career book. So I had a leg up to start with. But trying to find the others to fill in was a tough task.
Bruce, I mean, you mentioned analog. I mean, we're talking, and as I mentioned earlier, four decades here. What's changed in photography of sports, especially, or anything for that matter, in the last 40 years? I mean, we've seen camera businesses go under. Things have changed quite a bit here. What have you noticed?
Well, obviously the digital revolution has changed so many industries, none as much as photography. So in the early days, shooting negative and slide film and then waiting until later that night or the next day or even a couple of days to see whether you actually had images in focus and whether you captured that definitive moment. Well, now you know instantly that you've failed. Basically, you take a look at the back of the camera and you know whether you have the image or not. And obviously, those moments in history, you can't go back and reshoot them. So it's good to know immediately whether you have, in fact, nailed the moment or not.
Bruce, I looked at some of your photographs, and I was familiar with your work, and I'm not even a photographer myself, but having been a fan of hockey for years and seen photos. BruceBennettStudios.com, and there are photographs there that I have seen before and probably and the average person wouldn't associate to you. But, I mean, if people have seen a hockey photograph, there's a good chance it's yours.
It's always great when I hear that. Sometimes people are more in tune with that little 6-point type underneath the photograph that has my name or from the older days BBS or the current days Getty Images next to it. And what's interesting is as people look at photos in the book, they'll say either this is my favorite shot or this has been one of my favorite shots, or they'll say, oh, I remember that photograph. I had no idea that you were the guy who shot it.
Bruce Bennett's with us here on TSN 1290, Hockey's Greatest Photos, the Bruce Bennett collection. I mean, I'm reading about you and your career. I mean, you sold all 2 million hockey images to Getty, about a decade ago?
Yeah. I've been with Getty Images directing their hockey coverage for 11 years now. And, quite different from being sole proprietorship and having 15 photographers working for me out of my office just outside of New York City, and then going to a company with a worldwide presence. There's just so much support that I get in continuing my life's work of shooting hockey.
Bruce, I saw a picture of Wayne Gretzky, and it's a young Wayne Gretzky. And I thought, you know what, I think I've seen that photograph before, but I'm not quite sure. Are there photographs for you that really stand out? Like, could you have got this down to a top 10 if you had to?
You know, what's funny is I'm often asked which is my favorite photograph, or through the last 15, 20 years when I've needed to put together my top 10. It's kind of interesting because that top 10 just kind of changes and shifts year after year and maybe interview after interview. There are a couple of favorites, and Gretzky, the Gretzky photo as an 18-year-old is certainly right up there, and that's how that one made the book cover. But I guess my opinion changes, and even putting the book together, it was one of those things where it was such a tough decision picking between photographs because my favorites do change depending on my mood.
Great picture of Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr both together in Pittsburgh, and it's the hair that jumps out really to me, which dates it. When you're taking pictures of a team photo or a portrait, if I could call it that, versus live action, what is the difference in shooting those two scenarios?
I think shooting on the ice, it's more the thrill of the hunt. And that's really more what I'm geared to do is try to capture that moment as it unfolds. I never really was a good portrait photographer, and in fact, I think in my backward in the book, I wrote something about it was a tough decision to picking out whether a photograph had some historical significance. Was it more important that whether it was good technically or whether it was a portrait or not? I mean, I really wasn't good at portraits. I would get a guy in front of the camera like the Lemieux and Jagr photo, and I'd shoot a few frames, and then I would be like, okay, I really don't know what else to do with these guys. It definitely wasn't my strong suit in any way, shape, or form.
Bruce, was there a photograph that you got that surprised you at the end of the day, that maybe something stirred you more than you would have thought it would?
There's always a surprise in there. Sometimes when you think you miss it and you take a look at you review the images, or you get them processed in the earlier days and you're surprised that you have the image. It's always fun when you look at the images that you shoot from the remote cameras. And that could be a camera that I place in the net or up in the rafters. And you really don't know till the end of a game or an end of a period when you go through those images. You really don't know whether you captured anything that's worthy. One that comes to mind is Los Angeles Kings defeating the New York Rangers for the Stanley Cup a couple of years back. I was in the Zamboni corner watching the game on the scoreboard, getting ready to go out onto the ice. It was overtime, so I was standing there for quite some time. And I had a camera in the rafters, and I was still pushing a button on a radio remote, tripping that camera, hoping that would come up with a viable image. And it really came up with one that defined jubilation and dejection in the same frame. And that's really what makes a great sports image.
I've seen sports photographers, in specific with hockey, down in the corner, pulling the little plexiglass hole out to shoot the lens through. And you talked about having cameras up top in rafters. Is there a point where, we hear a lot about drones nowadays. Where is photography going, especially of hockey, and is there new ways to capture images?
Well, I think if we see, we've seen the divergence of still photography and video, and it's getting closer and closer. The new camera models that come out, they all do HD video, the high-end cameras. They'll do stills, they'll do HD video. And I think coming up, the next models will probably have even better video, the 4K video, and eventually 8K video. So where I am now shooting stills, I'm at 8 or 10 frames a second, sometimes 12 frames a second. And if I can shoot at 30 frames a second doing video, I have a greater chance of success of capturing that definitive moment. It's just a matter of whether the software will catch up with the digital cameras so that I'll be able to pull out a good still image from the video.
Bruce,
once that happens, the whole industry changes.
Who takes your picture?
I actually, what's kind of weird is I don't show up on film or on digital. I've got a little werewolf vampire thing going on.
When you look at all this career now, I mean, you would have met different individuals. How much can an individual influence how you shoot them?
I don't think I have a good answer for that. With the hockey players, you get used to some of the players, how they move, what their typical moves are. Do they go along the boards? Or do they spin towards center ice? And that's something, being a student of the game and learning the typical move players will make through the years. With any sports photography, the better you know a sport and the better you know the athletes who participate in the sport, that makes you better at your craft.
The book is called Hockey's Greatest Photos, the Bruce Bennett Collection, BruceBennettStudios.com, and they can follow you on Twitter, Bruce, at Bruce_Bennett. Look, I appreciate the time here. Good luck with the book. It's, from what I've seen of photos on the website, it'll be a fascinating book to read and to look at.
Thanks so much. It was great being with you today.
There's Bruce Bennett, Hockey's Greatest Photos, the Bruce Bennett Collection. And as I mentioned, check out his website at BruceBennettStudios.com. You will see some of the photos and get an idea of what to expect in this book. And it's not just, I mean, there are those ones that are portrait-type photos, which are interesting. Some of them are kind of funny. And then there's others that the imagery that's caught during live action is, it's fascinating, quite frankly.